Iran's supreme leader has praised his country's missile strike on Israel, calling it fully legal and legitimate.
The EU approves stiff tariffs on Chinese EVs despite a lack of majority.
Two Swedish teenagers are arrested in connection with explosions near the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen on Wednesday.
Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has praised his country's missile strike on Israel and said it would be done again if necessary.
کاری که نیروهای مسلح ما کردن کمترین مجازات برای رژیم غاصب صهیونی در برابر جنایت‌های حیرت آور اون رژیم بود. رژیم خون آشام، رژیم گرگ صفت، سگ هار آمریکا در منطقه.
It's the first time in 5 years Khamenei has led Friday's prayer in Tehran, and he took the opportunity to urge other Islamic nations to take action against the enemy. It follows a series of Israeli airstrikes launched on the southern suburbs of Beirut overnight, alongside another that cut off the main border crossing between Lebanon and Syria. Tens of thousands of people had been using the crossing over the past 2 weeks to flee the war in Lebanon. Protests have also been held in the West Bank after an Israeli airstrike hit a refugee camp, killing 18 Palestinians. The Israeli military says the strike killed Hamas's leader in the camp.
EU countries have continued to evacuate their citizens from Lebanon as hostilities between Israel and Hezbollah escalate. Germany flew another 130 of its citizens out of the country on board a military plane that landed in Frankfurt. The German Foreign Ministry said in a post on X that the evacuation plane also brought 5 tons of aid, particularly medical equipment, into the Lebanese capital. Greece also sent a military transport plane to Beirut on Thursday to bring home both Greek and Cypriot nationals who wanted to leave Lebanon. The C-130, carrying 38 Cypriots and 22 Greeks, landed in Cyprus before heading to a military airfield near Athens later in the day. Greece's foreign ministry says it's established hotlines for its citizens living in Lebanon to call if they require assistance in leaving the country. Spain evacuated the first group of its citizens on Thursday, bringing 250 people home on board 2 military planes which landed at an airbase near the capital, Madrid. The Spanish Foreign Ministry said the situation in Lebanon is so serious that part of the embassy staff will also be airlifted out of Beirut on a second plane, leaving only a skeleton staff behind to carry out essential diplomatic work. And France has also started evacuating its citizens, with the first group arriving on one of 4 flights that landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. The French embassy in Lebanon has reportedly negotiated 2 additional flights to Paris with the Lebanese national airline MEA. Meanwhile, flag carrier Air France says it's suspended all passenger flights to Lebanon until at least the 8th of October. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has appealed to Western allies for better cooperation in combating Russian airstrikes during his nightly video address. Zelensky said it was important to strengthen frontline defenses before the onset of the bitter Ukrainian winter.
Ми бачимо, що однією з головних причин дефіциту безпеки у небі України, і, зокрема, поруч із кордонами НАТО, наших сусідів, є дефіцит рішень про спільну роботу, про спільний захист. Те, що працює у небі Близького Сходу і допомагає обороні Ізраїля, може працювати і в небі нашої частини Європи, в Україні, так само допомагаючи рятувати життя.
Those comments come on the same day that new NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte visited Kyiv and pledged the alliance's continued support. The NATO chief vowed when he took office on Tuesday to help shore up Western support for Ukraine, which has been fighting Russia's full-scale invasion since February 2022. Rutte also said recent steps had been taken to build a bridge to NATO membership for Ukraine, including 40 billion euros of funding assistance and bilateral security agreements. Meanwhile, evacuations continue for people living in the eastern city of Dnipro. Officials there say more than 2,500 people have passed through the transit point for internally displaced people since the end of August. Local media say Russian forces attacked 3 districts in the region several times on Thursday using artillery and drones, injuring 3 people.
European member states have failed to agree on whether the EU should apply steeper tariffs on China-made electric vehicles. Now the decision goes back to the EU Commission, who can implement its proposal. This means that the tariffs can be imposed. The vote in Council revealed clear divisions. 10 countries voted in favour of the tariffs, with France and Italy amongst them. Germany and 4 more countries voted against. However, the abstention of 12 countries meant that there was no result.
Germany's car manufacturers operate largely at the higher end. It's mostly premium cars, and they invested heavily within China. Given that their premium branding, they don't not too worried about competition on the lower end of the markets from Chinese imports. Whereas French and Italian producers have not invested as heavily in China, and they compete much more directly on the low end of the market, and they therefore much more worried about the effect that Chinese competition would have for the European market.
The high number of abstentions reflects long-standing concerns about how Europe should stand up to China. Even though there is agreement about the fact that Beijing's unfair trade practices merit a forceful, united response, fears of commercial retaliation appear to have dampened the resolve of many capitals, especially with a make-or-break date approaching.
I think what is clear is that the Chinese government would retaliate. That is what they normally do, and they already signaled where they will do this, which would be agricultural exports. Now, compared to the EV market, the agriculture market, even though it's politically very important, is economically not that big. So the question is basically, will that be enough for an escalation on the European side, and basically to which extent the Chinese side will escalate in more and more bigger sectors?
Friday's vote marked a victory for the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. In its statement, the EU Commission still left the door open for a different outcome, stating that the EU and China would continue to work hard to explore an alternative solution.
Certain FIFA rules on international player transfers are in breach of EU law, the EU's top court said on Friday. The Court of Justice of the European Union handed down its ruling following a decade-long legal challenge spearheaded by former footballer Lassana Diarra. According to the ECJ, certain FIFA rules impede the free movement of footballers wanting to progress their careers by working for new clubs. In 2013, Diarra signed a 4-year contract with Russian team Lokomotiv Moscow, but the deal was terminated after Diarra was allegedly unhappy with pay cuts. Lokomotiv Moscow applied to FIFA for compensation, with its arbitration court finding Diarra's sacking was based on just cause. The player was ordered to pay the club millions of euros. Diarra claimed his search for a new club was hampered by FIFA rules, stating any new side would be jointly responsible for paying Lokomotiv compensation. FIFPro, the union representing footballers, celebrated the recent ECJ ruling, saying it would change the EU sporting labour market.
2 Swedish teenagers have been arrested at Copenhagen train station in connection with 2 explosions near the Israeli embassy in the Danish capital on Wednesday. No one was injured in the pre-dawn blasts, which happened in a neighborhood that's home to several foreign diplomatic missions. The pair were ordered to be held in pre-trial detention for 27 days. They face preliminary charges of possessing illegal weapons and carrying 5 hand grenades. 2 of the grenades blew up when the suspects threw them at a house near the embassy, but the Israeli mission wasn't damaged. Danish broadcaster DR said the teenagers aged 16 and 19 are suspected of acting in association and together with prior agreement with one or more perpetrators. Denmark's Prime Minister said it was becoming increasingly dangerous to be a Jew in Europe.
antisemitismen den stiger. Jeg kan ikke tage afstand nok fra det, og bare sige til både de danske jøder og alle andre, der går op i deres velbefindende, det er heldigvis rigtig mange af os, at myndighederne gør alt, hvad myndighederne kan for at passe på det jødiske mindretal i Danmark.
This comes after shots were fired late on Tuesday at the Israeli embassy in Stockholm. No one was injured and no arrests have been made. The Danish Domestic Security Service PET said that Swedish authorities had assessed that attack had links to Iran.
Thousands have staged a march through central Vienna to urge the country's political parties not to join a coalition with the far right. It comes as the FPÖ, for the first time in its history, won national elections on Sunday with 29% of the vote. Protesters held signs that read, "It's Thursday again," alluding to demonstrations that broke out on Thursdays in the 2000s against the center-right OVP entering into a coalition with the FPÖ. According to the organizers, over 25,000 people took part in the protest on Thursday evening. The largely Eurosceptic party campaigned on an anti-immigration platform, promising voters measures to boost Austria's economy. Without a full majority, the party would need to form a coalition government in order to govern, which would mark the first time that Austria has been ruled by the far right since World War II.